Hi, everybody. Welcome to this panel on the works of Ursula Vernon. I'm Kate Nevue. I am your moderator. I'm going to ask the panelists to introduce themselves. If you would like to give your pronouns, you may. You're not required to. And if you want to give, just one thing that you particularly like about Ursula Vernon's works, however big or small, just as kind of a taster. I am going to just go by order of the people that I have on my screen, just probably not the order that you can see on YouTube, sorry. Adrian, if you would like to unmute yourself and start, that would be awesome, thank you.
And thank you for the reminder to unmute, because I would not have done that because I always forget. I'm Adrian Martini. I write reviews for Locus magazine. I am a huge fan of Ursula Vernon's, or T. Kingfisher, depending on how you want to break them up, her pragmatic female heroes.
Natalie?
Hi, I'm Natalie Loers. I am a former book reviewer for RT Book Reviews, and I generally just yell about things on the internet. And I'm a Hugo finalist this year and I'm throwing my headphones around, so that's awesome. I'm a Hugo finalist for my essay entitled George R.R. Martin Can Fuck Off Into the Sun. And one of my favorite things, actually, just like Adrian, is the female heroes. I really enjoy reading them.
Your sound twinged out for a sec, but I heard you talk about female heroes.
Yeah, the pragmatic heroes.
Great, thank you. Sarah, or is it Sarah Beth? I'm sorry, I forget.
Yeah, I write under my full name, so I always put it on there. Hi, everybody. I am Sarah Beth Durst. I write fantasy for kids, teens, and adults. I have about 24 books out, which means I'm behind Ursula, so I have to write more, like, as soon as this panel is over. My most recent adult book, I'm going to show you guys, is The Bone Maker, which is about second chances and bone magic. Also the author of Race the Sands, which is monster racing, and Queen of Blood, and the subsequent books, which are Bloodthirsty Nature Spirits. And on the kids' side, I read lots of talking animal books, Kids and Unicorn, Even and Odd, Girl and Lightning Dragon, Giant Talking Cat.
So we can definitely see your affinities in a lot of ways.
Yeah, so I adore Ursula's writing. I think my favorite thing is the way she takes these bizarre details that you would never think of, and they're amazing. Like in the Dragon Breath books, the sentient potato salad is genius.
Ruthanna, do you want to unmute and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Ruthanna Emrys. I'm the author of Wintertide and Deep Roots. More to the point of this panel, I co-blog Reading the Weird on Tor.com, where we just finished up a read-through of Hollow Places, which is one of Ursula's two absolutely terrifying horror books. I've been a fan of her stuff since her stuff was a bunch of pictures of weird little animal people on DeviantArt many years ago. And I swear I was going to say this before everyone else said it, but I love her heroines. I love their combination of pragmatism with having this constant stream of wry, dumb joke commentary going on in their heads that you absolutely can't say aloud in the middle of a crisis, which is exactly the way my brain works in a crisis. And I also love the way that her books come out several times a year in the middle of actual crises, very unlike me, so that in the middle of trying to deal with these crises on a regular basis, I can be like, oh God, this week, but at least there is a new T. Kingfisher book to take my mind off of things.
Absolutely. All right. I forgot to mention two things. One would be my favorites, and I'm hard pressed to pick just one. I'm going to probably shout out a book we may or may not have time to talk about, one of the Farrar retellings, the Snow Queen one, which I believe is called The Raven and the Reindeer. I forgot what time this panel was, so I was sort of scrambling to get ready. I apologize to all of my co-panelists. The other thing is that if we were, alas, physically at ReaderCon on a panel like this, if I saw the audience, the author in the audience, I would say, you know, we're glad to have you here. We love your stuff. This is ReaderCon. We love nothing uncritically. And therefore, for the next 45 minutes, you are dead to us. You know, we pretend you are not here. We believe firmly in the death of the author as a critical thing. And, you know, I would say, but, you know, if you want at the end of the panel, if you have comments, you know, we're welcome to give you the floor at the end. I do not have Discord open. I do not know if Ursula is here. I have asked the Discord monitor to save any comments that if she is here, that she does want to make, to save them, and we will read them at the end. So yeah, okay. So many people have mentioned comfort reading and humor, and I think that is where we should start. It was interesting. I was rereading, I reread the first of the Black Dogs duology, which was one of her very, very early adult fantasy works. I did not have time to reread the second book, but it was really interesting to me how little of that leavening humor and lightness there was. Those are dark books, you know. They are trying to do hard things about sexual violence. You know, there's you know, in some ways they feel kind of like Mercedes Lackey of the sort of era of By the Sword to me. And so in a way, I'm not surprised that they're not as well known, I think, among her readership, because they are somewhat different in that sense. But what would people like to talk about in terms of that sort of the threading of humor? You know, are people interested in like the craft and the mechanics of it, or the content? You know, talk to me. Who wants to start by talking about that? Ruth Anna, yeah.
Sure. I find it really interesting the way that her work combines the dark stuff and the light stuff in a way that isn't really quite normal for the subgenre boundaries of either. You can be in the middle of a fluffy, funny romance, and suddenly there are, you know, dead bodies or horrible alternate dimensions with images that are going to give you nightmares. But you can also be in the middle of especially with her more recent work, and I think that the mix is something that she's moved towards over time. You can have horror in which there are these intense scenes of emotional comfort and understanding of the types of relationships and places that it takes to have comfort and belonging in the middle of a universe full of horrors. And the way those things mix together feels, I think, more comforting in some ways than a book in which either you're just going to get the grimdark with none of the stupid jokes that people make in the middle of actual grimdark stuff, or humor that doesn't acknowledge that you're reading it to try and find a little corner of light in the middle of the dark stuff.
I think for me, oh, sorry, I didn't see the hand go up, but for me, it's the juxtaposition feels more like real life to me. So you have one of my favorites is Minor Mage, which I don't think gets enough love. where you have the hero has a gift, yes, but it's not a particularly useful gift. Like it's a very silly gift, but he has it. So, but it's about trying to make that one little gift you have work in the face of just vast conflict and unpleasantness. And it's kind of, you realize it's such an absurd situation, and it's kind of, it harkens to real life, where like, yes, we all have our little gifts, but you know, it can get pretty bleak out there, but we're still trying to figure out the way to make it work in the face of the bleakness. And the way a lot of us do that is by the humor and by the little asides that you have either in your head or actually say out loud. And I think that's what makes it work for me.
Natalie?
Yeah, one of the things I like I don't read horror, but I will read Ursula's horror because I trust her. But, you know, the dog doesn't die. You know that the deaths aren't going to be of the characters you come to know and love, aren't going to necessarily, they aren't going to be needless or useless. She's just not throwing bodies against the wall to see what sticks, you know? So there's this level of trust and rapport, I think, that she builds with her reader that I think, you know, really lightens a lot of the really heavy stuff she talks about. You know, she has like, yeah, like the Twisted Ones was like completely messed up. I just want to, you know, in many
Yeah, it
ways.
genuinely jump scared me, which is hard to do.
Yeah, I mean, I liked it because I like loved like the weird fairy crap. Yeah, give more of that, but this is just really weird and scary.
Your sound glitched out briefly there. Do you want to?
Sorry.
Can you recap just real quick?
I just said, you know, there's the weird fairy stuff
Right.
and the Evil Dead grandma.
Yes. Yes, we didn't hear the Evil Dead grandma. That's a very important part of that book. One thing I noticed about those books, I have to confess, The Hollow Places was not as much to my taste because I didn't find the kind of the hollow place, you know, the other world as compelling as the messed up fairy. But I was very interested in how those were very concerned with classic horror stories, which I didn't know at all, and it didn't matter. I imagine it would probably be more a richer experience, but that they were still very accessible, even though they were extremely concerned with that kind of genre history. Yeah. And I think part of the integration of humor may also come from the experience of writing kids' books. Sarah, did you want to jump in on this real quick?
Yeah, actually, and you totally just mentioned the thing I wanted to mention is
Yeah.
I haven't talked to her about it to know whether it's true, but I had to guess, I would think that her mix of humor and serious does rise out of the work in children's literature, because that's one of the best things about writing for the middle grade age group is that you can be silly and serious in the same paragraph without needing to be ironic. Yeah. So I would not be surprised if at a craft level it arose out of that. And I'm going to agree with Adrienne about the humor making it feel real. I am deeply suspicious of books that don't have a sense of humor, because I find it such like a basic human coping mechanism. It's how we deal with things, especially terrible situations. So balancing out that the horror and the seriousness and some of the other issues with gallows humor or just plain snarkiness feels real to me. And that's one of the things that I love about her work, is that balance of the light and the dark. Someone had mentioned Minor Mage, and also, wait, hold up. My favorite, Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking, which I adore. Both of those tackle the pretty serious idea of kids shouldn't have to be heroes. If kids are heroes, the adults screwed up. But they do, she does it amidst the gingerbread men doing a can-can in the middle of a battle and other amazing scenes. Where you're dealing with a pretty serious theme there. Yeah. I love that.
And I mean, there's I can't remember the name of it, but the Dragon Breath book with the ghost. You know, we first encountered that in our family when we were still reading them out loud to our kids, and we were like, this is really scary. And the kids were fine. It also reminds me, that theme that you mentioned reminds me of maybe one of my favorite of her books, which is Summer and Orcus, which I love for just the unabashed kitchen sinkness of it, which also has a sort of similar, like, you know, kids as heroes and maybe like a kind of a different idea of heroism. I did promise we would move on to talking about pragmatic protagonists, but before we do that, does anybody want to have further thoughts on humor and comfort before we do? Okay. You know, oh, Sarah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say that a lot of times people talk about escapist reading like it's a bad thing or minimalize it in some ways, but I think that that's one of the most important things that a book can do. And I think that's one of the ways that Ursula succeeds so brilliantly, is that she manages to make these fun books that can take you away from whatever's going on in, you know, the world these days. And I think that is so important and so necessary. So I'm very glad I've discovered her books.
So we wanted, a lot of people mentioned the pragmatism, especially of her female protagonists at the start. Ruthanna or Natalie, I don't know if either of you want to start with this since you've been a little quieter most recently, but yeah, what's the appeal there? What are some of the ways those are executed that you particularly like?
Yeah, I can jump in on that one. I read a whole bunch of books in preparation for this panel, and one of the ones I reread was Sword Heart. And you know, Hallett just keeps telling herself, you know, stop your dithering, roll up your sleeves, and like get to work. And I think that's so much of life, that, you know, you can't go around stuff that's hard. You have to kind of just go through it. And so like with the heroine, with the female protagonist being just like really practical and pragmatic, it's very different than, you know, oh, they're the chosen one. They're not the chosen ones. They're the ones who happen to be there. And I find that extremely appealing. For whatever reason, I think that's just something I don't think you see a lot of in fiction. You know, I'm rereading some older books right now, and it's like chosen one, and I'm like, that doesn't happen in the real world. You know, nobody's going to come and save us. We have to save ourselves. And I think, you know, that's what you see in these protagonists, is that they're saving themselves and also, you know, making a small part of the world a better place while they do it.
Yeah.
And going back to the minor mage thing, there's, in so much of stories in which people have to be heroes, there's a very limited set of skills that are treated as heroic. And in Vernon's work, any background, any set of skills can be a good way of handling a crisis. I'm reluctant to say heroic because part of what she's doing, I think, is breaking down the valorization of heroes. But it's, you know, if you roll up your sleeves, you could be an editor, you could be a baker, you could be a graphic designer, and you're going to use that because you are looking for ways to solve the problems. So in the Twisted Ones, you've got a graphic designer, and the fact that she notices little things about the environment and differences of light and color matters. It doesn't make the whole thing less traumatic, but it matters for getting out of it. And so does her willingness to, you know, trusts other people who are worthy of trust. And if you're a baker, then you will find ways to use your baking. And it's that particular take on pragmatism, that where the pragmatism is something of using what you got rather than having spent your whole life preparing for a specific sort of crisis, and then aren't you great, you're the person who guessed what kind of crisis we were going to have. I really appreciate that.
Adrian, just can you hang on just half a sec, because I realized I forgot an administrative thing. I mentioned at the start that if Ursula's here and has comments, we're going to save those to the end. If anybody who's on Discord has questions, please direct them to the Discord monitor, will pass them to me, and we'll get to them sort of at natural breakpoints. I'm just mentioning this because I haven't seen any yet. And I just wanted to make sure I hadn't inadvertently suggested we would only do audience questions at the very end. Adrian, please unmute. Thanks. No, you're still muted. There we go. Yes.
So I had to write myself 2 notes. So I would like to see, the first note is just silly because I would like to see Ursula write a book in which her hero or heroine is prepared for a certain kind of crisis and then gets handed a completely different crisis to deal with. Second, or anybody, I'd like to see that book. So there you go, have at it. One of the things that the pragmatism to me, and the heroes not being the chosen ones, translates so well into the real world. And while there's a certain amount of escapism that's in her work, there's also kind of lessons for living in this time, in the sense that part of not being the chosen one, which we all are, is being the one to still stand up and go, nope, not going to do it. Nope, this is a bad idea. I will protect these people in my community. And I think that's the pragmatism for me that translates the best, because it in a way, it's an instruction for this time and this place.
Does anybody have anything else to add on that before I move to a potentially controversial topic? Sarah, oh, sorry, I'm sorry, Sarah, you did not have a chance. I apologize. I'm very sorry. Thank you for unmuting, so I remembered that you were there. Go ahead.
No, I actually firmly believe that fantasy is or can be a literature of hope and empowerment. And I think what you were saying, Adrian, here I'm gesturing, I have no idea if you're actually over there when you appear on the thing, but whatever, that it does give you tools for coping. I mean, the escapist journey takes you away, and then when it brings you back, my favorite books are the ones that make you feel stronger, that make you feel like you can go defeat that army, you can go solve that problem. The other little thing I wanted to add to it, I had jotted down 2 of my favorite quotes from along the lines of this hero thing. From Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking, Uncle Albert has this whole speech where he says, "You expect heroes to survive terrible things. If you give them a medal, then you don't ever have to ask why the terrible thing happened in the first place or try to fix it." And it's echoed in Minor Mage too. And there's Oliver was already on his knees, but he bowed his head, feeling complicated things he didn't know how to deal with. When kindness came from murdered ghosts and lost pigs, and the adults that were supposed to help you were monsters that walked like men. It didn't matter that I was young, my village sent me away, and he still resented that. But love and pity and resentment were all mixed together, and he didn't have any way to untangle them. Yes, agreed the Rain Wife, that is the price your village paid. You will never love them with your whole heart again. The shadow of what they did in their fear will lie between you forever, but they will be alive nonetheless. And learning to bridge that shadow or decide not to is the work of adulthood. I love that she does this in like her kids' books. Like, I think it's awesome.
Okay, any last thoughts on this? Okay, I am now going to hear the phone in my house ringing and I'm going to ignore it. I am going to issue a content note. We're going to be talking maybe for the next 5 minutes or so about domestic violence and victim blaming. if this is also going to contain spoilers for Paladin's Strength, which is the most recent book, and to a lesser extent for Digger, the Mammoth graphic novel. If any of that is not something that you want to hear right now, I suggest you step away for like the next 5-ish minutes. So when I was thinking about the works of Vernon, I was thinking about, both the many, many strengths and also the points where I'm like, Digger, which I adore, and freely recommend. I always have to recommend 2 caveats. The first is that it has as a major secondary character a real life, a deity from a real life religion in a fully secondary world fantasy, which, is not really cool. The other thing, and the more serious thing, is that there's a plot in which there is one of the characters, a male character, is the victim of domestic violence, and explicitly says that in describing the situation, that he was to blame. He says everyone was to blame, but he specifically says that he was to blame for not stopping what his wife did to him and did to others, until eventually he does. And then in Paladin's Strength, there is a subplot in which the subplot with the creepy clay people, in which ultimately, thank you, yes, Paladin's Strength, in which ultimately we discovered that somebody, a man, literally creates his own abuser, is unable, is very clearly emotionally and physically abused by his creation, and ultimately decides that he has enabled the terrible things that his creation has done to many other people, and has to take responsibility by killing himself. And in the text, this is very sad, but it's also not questioned that this was the right thing for him to do. And that felt to me very much like victim blaming, and it made me unhappy. I wanted to, bring these things up. And I was thinking when we were talking about pragmatic female protagonists earlier, whether there was maybe some link between this idea that, you step up and you deal with the situation in front of you, to that sort of gets extended in an unhealthy way towards these male victims of domestic violence. She has, plenty of female characters who are in abusive relationships, who you don't see ending up dead because they, should have done better. Now, I don't know if anybody wants to disagree or, suggest different ways of looking at this, or otherwise discuss this, but it is something that, this is really kind of the big thing that bothers me about her collected body of work, and so I wanted to raise it. Sarah.
Yeah, I had a slightly different reading of that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I thought that character had gone so, the plot had gone so dark that his only choice was to kill himself or be killed. And by choosing to do it to himself, he was taking on that agency. I didn't think there was any way that character could possibly survive and not have it be a total tragedy of a book. So given that his fate was kind of written in stone, I felt that at least he reclaimed some of himself in that moment. So I thought it was a moment of him claiming power rather than losing it, if that makes sense.
Interesting. Yeah. Does anybody else have thoughts on this, Natalie?
Yeah, I was reading it as, I don't know how to pronounce the character's name, but the potter. Mm-hmm. That he was almost almost a mirror for Istvan, in that, Istvan was like, I should have killed him when I had the chance. I should have killed him when I had the chance. And when I initially reread the book, the way it's written, it's like one line where he throws himself upon Istvan's weapon. And I thought Istvan had done it. until Kate, you mentioned something, and I went back and I reread it. Oh no. And no, he has killed himself. But the other thing I want to is that he's disabled. That he's clearly got some sort of disability before he creates what I'm calling Smooth Man Prime. He has some sort of, and then he's further disabled by, and these are spoilers. Smooth Man Prime takes a chunk out of his head, so he's got a traumatic brain injury, and then he chops off his hands, so he can't even do the one thing he was good at anymore. So having a disabled character have no choice but obviously in a magic system, it makes sense. But at the same time, that sits uncomfortably with me now that I'm thinking about it. So I just wanted to put that out there as well.
Yeah. Ruthanna?
So I have been really interested lately in the discussions about reparative reading of problematic and potentially problematic works. So with the caveat that I do see that there's some definite differences in how male and female abuse, people who are victims of abuse are getting treated in some of this work, I want to at least offer up a potential reparative reading, because in the context of this full set of work in which many, many characters are dealing with coming out of abusive situations, some of which are physical and some of which are verbal and some of which are just complicated. I can see, I'm not going to speak to Digger because I haven't read that one, but I can see the most recent Paladin book as getting, sort of exploring the question of what does it take to actually have some responsibility for the actions of your abuser, and that suggesting that if you did not literally mold them yourself out of clay, then you might want to be more generous with yourself, because I've had that sort of conversation with a lot of people where pointing to that sort of fantastic extreme situation and saying, it's not that, you can see very clearly that it's not that, would be a welcome and valuable thing.
Yeah, see, I read that and I'm like, I mean, there's specifically a line that says, creating life sounds like it would be amazing, but then you're responsible for what you do. Like, and I feel like a lot of parents might have pretty complicated reactions to that line. I definitely, ever since my kids were born, I've been acutely aware of the ways in which I have been unable to control them. So, that's tricky. I think that's tricky. I get what you're saying, but there is definitely sort of a limit to how far that, even in the situation when you've literally created somebody's doing terrible things, I do think that, that's tricky. Adrienne, did you want to chime in on this, or do you? No? Okay. Does anybody else have anything to add before we move on?
I just wanted to say that, like the Potter, he made choices.
Mm-hmm.
He could have refused to sew him to the goat or whatever. He could have refused, and he did make some choices there.
Yeah.
Decisions. He could have smashed the bust. He chose not to. Mm-hmm. But yeah. I think it is complicated. I really like Ruthanna and Sarah's reading on this, kind of maybe, as an, reclaiming like an agency or a reparative reading. So I'm going to have to think about it, but thank you so much. Yeah. That was really, really interesting.
Sarah, Sarah, our Discord monitor, can you just do me a favor and ping the Discord chat just so that I know that you're there? I'm just a little anxious that we haven't got any audience questions yet. We also wanted to talk about somebody. Okay, thank you, Sarah. I appreciate that. change topics a little bit. What do we want to talk about next? I will give options. Do we want to talk about fantasy Unitarians, or do we want to talk about sex scenes? Just completely change of complete change of mood here. The other possible thing was I had forwarded around a link to a talk, a transcript of a talk that someone named Robin Ann Reed had presented at MythCon 2021. It's hosted on File 770, which mentioned the relationship between the female protagonist and the broken warrior, which a lot of people seem to be struck by. So who just really wants to talk about one of these things? Adrienne, you've unmuted. What's up?
I do. I want to talk about fantasy Unitarians.
Yeah, go for it.
Whom also have sex, but I can't figure out a way to make that all work together right now. So we go back to the pragmatic, practical thing where the religions that Vernon has constructed in the most recent books. I'm thinking specifically of the Paladin books, but you see it as well in the two before that, whose titles are leaving my head. I'm sure somebody is currently yelling them at their screen, and I am not dragging them. Yes, the clockwork
ones.
The clockwork books.
Yeah. Yes, and Bear Tongue, Natalie is quite right.
Yes,
Clockwork Boys and Wonder Engine. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. So one of the things that somebody in our email chat before this mentioned that at least the Temple of the White Rat seems to be like the Unitarians of the world that she's created. And that struck me as just genius. And I don't know that that is intentional. And I didn't think there was another reading because I just hadn't really thought about it until Kate mentioned the idea of really identifying with the lawyers of the world. So one thing I would like to hear other people talk about is their response to the way the religion is constructed in kind of those later books, because the Temple of the White Rat is only one small corner of it. Or I might be the only one who's fascinated by these religions. They just seem like very pragmatic sects like SECTS, each one has its own specific purpose. And I find that really interesting because in the actual world and in a lot of constructed fantasy worlds, like it's kind of this big agglomeration of religion, as opposed to where here they're very finely diced.
Yeah, I love them too. And I like the way that they're almost divided by attitudes towards the world and towards what problems need to be solved and how to solve them, with the White Rat being very, they're lawyerly, they're pragmatic, they want to solve the little problems to make people's lives easier in a world that may have very large problems that they can't solve. And then you have, I'm trying to remember exactly what it's called, the Hanged Mother, who are very, I'm trying to think of the word that I'm looking for. And I think the problem is that everyone is not pure enough for them and that they could go around hitting people. And then you have the Paladins who also go around hitting people, but in a very different way that is nevertheless maybe not an ideal way after all. And that it's sort of setting against each other, or sometimes in combination, these different ways of going after problems.
Yeah, I just want to super quick mention that the Hanged Mother, I think, is a sort of vibe, for lack of a better word, that Vernon has been interested in for a while. There's a church with a very similar attitude in Digger. Natalie or Sarah, did you want to chime in on this? Yeah, go ahead.
I find the religions absolutely fascinating, particularly the Paladins, because I know, I think Ursula said that that all the Paladins are always like these sort of like sad crap sack Jedis. and she wanted to write something different. And I think she's really succeeded, particularly with the Paladins of the Saint of Steel. You know, what does a paladin do when their god is dead? And I think, you know, in Paladin's Strength, you see Istvan questioning, you know, was all that killing I did actually the right thing? Or, you know, it's just because the god told me to do it. So, you know, the god took away the guilt I would normally have felt for mowing down all those people.
Sarah, did you have anything you wanted to add on this?
It's sort of tangential to it, but one of the things I love about her world building, beyond the religions, is the way she'll just state something and have it be true. Like, it's very I'm thinking much more of the children's books. It's very Roald Dahl. Now in the Dragon Breath books, for instance, they'll have a bus that just can take you to Japan instantly, and like, yeah, that's just what it does.
It's very important that it's mythological Japan.
Yes,
and that's very important, and I really like that.
And I love that detail, and I love that it's always sort of dialed up to 11 with all of the details in the world building. And one of my favorites that I just read was like Castle Hangnail. So I wanted to give that one a huge shout out, because I think that one touches on a whole bunch of different things we've talked about in this whole panel. For instance, when we're talking about the abuse thread that she visits in a number of her books, she visits toxic friendships in that book in a really realistic and effective way, in the setting of a little doll that can do tailor things, and an erotic goldfish, and a talking suit of armor, and so forth. So it's got that balance, it's got the world building. So I wanted to do a shout out for that one.
I just read Castle Hangnail. I was very pleased to discover my local library has all her children's books. So I read Castle Hangnail, and one thing that struck me is, you know, with the toxic friendship, is one of the things she learns from like the mole wizard is that she can consent to having her power used, and she doesn't have to consent, and that plays a big role later, you know, in the book. And I think consent is one of those common threads that, you know, kind of flows through the her different stories, particularly, you know, when it comes to the sexy times. So
before, I just wanted to mention in terms of,
but I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah, no, Castle Hangnail is great. Before we move off of religion, I just wanted to mention that the podcast, The Hidden Almanac, is very interesting because it's intensely secondary world faux Catholic, but also semi, like, one of the things that is a regular feature is like today is the feast day of X saint, and you have a bazillion different saints, but it's also semi polytheistic. You know, the main character has, you know, worships a particular deity, which probably is, you know, it's sort of ambiguous to me, at least, how that fits in, you know, if it's a monotheistic religion or not. I think it's probably polytheistic, but it's just interesting. It's very intensely Catholic vibes. But yeah, different Sarah. I got confused about my Sarahs. We have a comment from the chat that the question of what being a paladin does to paladins is a very interesting topic. Yeah, I was really glad to see that explored in the most recent book. I don't know if anyone else has anything they want to add on that question. We are getting a little short on time, but if anyone else has anything they want to add to that.
Just as that it seems related to the question of what being a hero does to people. It seems like another riff on that same theme.
Yeah. Sarah, our Discord monitor, do we have any comments from the author herself? Ursula is not online. Cool, thank you. All right. So we have about 7 minutes left. Do we want to talk about sexy time scenes? Do we want to talk about anything in the kids' books, or, you know, other media? What do we want to talk about for next? just anything at all? Yeah, Sarah, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to throw a thing from a pure writerly craft standpoint. One of the things that she does in her kids' books is she breaks the rules. And I think that's both brave and effective. You're told over and over again in kids' books that it always has to be the kid that has agency. You can't be writing about grown-ups. You can't see scenes from the grown-ups' point of view. Yet if you look at Castle Hangnail, it's almost 50% the adult, Major Domo, and his character arc and his growth. And I love that she is willing to break the rules to tell the story in the most effective way possible.
Does anybody else have thoughts on sort of the structure or, other aspects of the kids' books? Natalie.
Oh no, I was thinking about another structural thing,
Yeah, go
not
ahead.
related to the children's books.
Sure, go ahead.
Like with the Paladin books, and we talked about this briefly before the panel, was that there were like 7 Paladins of the Saint of Steel who survived, and we've gotten 2 books. So are we going to get 7 Paladin books? And that's like riffing on the romance genre trope. It's like a trope at this point, where you've got this like club of 5 guys, especially in Regencies. I don't know if these happen in other ones, but like this club of 5 Hellraisers, and then they all get a book and they all get domesticated. So, I mean, it's really interesting to kind of see that almost play out with these fantasy novels where romance isn't a significant, it is a significant component, but she's not writing romance novels.
Yeah, more broadly, I think.
Ruth Ann, I need to chew over whether I will call these romance novels or not. So you go ahead.
Okay. So I think one of the other things that I think that she either takes from romance or has in common with romance that I really like is, in general, her willingness to do riffs on the same structure, the same tropes, and explore them in more than one way. So you really get this multifaceted perspective on things that are normally in genres where you're not allowed to come back and look at them in different directions. So you have, multiple takes on the creepy alternate universe and multiple takes on, what it's like to recover from an unhealthy relationship, and multiple takes on the effects of having been a hero of some sort. And I really like that. I like that, just getting those different facets of a theme. And it does remind me a little of romance, even as it's not being done in exactly the way that romance tends to.
Adrian?
So I think that I would totally call them romance books. They use the structure of romance, essentially, keep them apart, bring them together briefly. Oh, then something else happens, then they're driven apart again, then they come back together again. And you're trying to put off that the moment at the end where it's either sexy times or they have the realization that, oh, this person is the person for me. And that's a pretty standard romance structure. What's different is Vernon has come into them sideways, which is kind of how she approaches her kids' books too. Like, all the tropes that you expect and all the structure that you expect, she kind of twists it just a little bit. But it's all still the same structure of a romance.
I think I've decided that I agree. I mean, no, from a marketing standpoint, they're not being published in romance, but I do think structurally they feel very much like a genre romance to me. We're getting a 2-minute warning. Sarah, did you want to chime in on this? And then I'm going to go around and ask people for last thoughts.
I just want to think one thing I've noticed through writing a lot is that you discover your obsessions after you've written like a few books. So, and one of the things that fantasy in particular is really good at is exploring the extremes of different topics, because you can go to such extremes with your plot and to such new and different places. So.
All right. Since we are almost out of time, I would like to wrap up by just going around, and if anybody has anything that they wanted to mention, but we didn't have time for, or just random last thoughts, please feel free. I'm going to, Adrian, sure. Go ahead.
Yes, my last thought is I would like to have gnolls in this world that we are occupying right now.
Natalie?
I agree 100%. I think gnolls are excellent people.
Rosanna?
Yes, definitely pro Knoll, and also I cannot wait for more books in that world in general.
Sarah?
I just like to have baking magic. That would be cool.
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
I'd like to have baking magic. That would be awesome.
Yeah, I have this intense desire to find someplace that will do me a custom perfume now, and I do not wear perfume at all. I would like to say that I am extremely curious to know if we will ever find out what happened to the Saint of Steel. I can't tell if that's a thing that's just going to be in the background or if that's, going to be plot somehow. And I'm fascinated that I don't know, because normally I would feel moderately certain. All right. This has been a very great time talking with you all. Thank you. Since I do not have to immediately go and eat dinner because I got the time of this panel wrong, I will be in hallway chat 2 to talk with anybody, although it sounds like chat has been pretty quiet, so I don't know if anyone will be there. But if you have time and want to chat, great. And if not, it's been wonderful talking to you all. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.